2026 is supposed to be the year of complete UFO disclosure. Is that going to happen? So there's a lot of buzz around it right now. There's a couple of movies coming out this year. One of them is a Steven Spielberg movie. And then another one is a documentary, which supposedly is documenting the actual disclosure from the government about UFOs, UAPs. So, are we getting the full information? Are we getting the truth? What is disclosure? I'm very passionate about this, and we're going to talk about it. So I'm going to go through a few different things. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what is a psychological operation. And that has to do with whether or not you're being told the truth. Now, I don't have any proof or evidence that there is any psychological operation going on. But it's important to understand this because when it comes to something this large, we need to be able to think critically. And so to do that, it's a good idea to take a look at what psychological operations are. Then we're going to talk about how the elites are controlling the UFO disclosure subject parameter. They're controlling the narrative. We're only talking about certain things, and disclosure is a huge subject that has many different moving parts to it. And we're only being forced to talk about certain things. And so you'll see that is getting a small amount of the parameters are being expanded while others are being completely swept under the rug. And then we're going to talk about a scripted alien invasion, which is a 2026 hypothetical disclosure scenario. So bear in mind, again, this is hypothetical. I don't have any proof for any of this. But if there were going to be a disclosure psychological operation by some unnamed, hidden, nefarious group, this would be one possible hypothetical scenario. And then we're going to talk about real disclosure has nothing to do with spaceships, because it does. It's nothing to do with spaceships. And then we are going to talk about full disclosure is already here. And then I am going to give you access to the links that are publicly available to anybody to see that full UFO disclosure has already happened. You're just not being directed to it. And so that's part of the groupthink issue that's going on, is that people are being led by the nose with what little information is being given to them, and they're not even taking advantage of all of the material that is being made available to them. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. So, what is a psychological operation? All right, psychological operation is a strategic method of influencing the emotions, motives, and objective reasoning of a target audience through the dissemination of selected information. Its effectiveness relies on the use of partial truths, factually accurate fragments that are stripped of context or woven into a deceptive narrative. By presenting these verified details, the operation gains a baseline of credibility, which is then used to mask a larger lie and/or steer the public toward a predetermined divisive conclusion. This selective use of truth creates a double bind where the individual is forced to accept a manipulative narrative because they can verify a portion of it, effectively neutralizing their natural skepticism. Now, when these conflicting inputs are orchestrated against a population, they trigger what's called traumatic cognitive dissonance. And this creates a state of mental paralysis where the brain is unable to reconcile the official truth with its own intuitive or observed reality. This dissonance hijacks the nervous system, shifting the brain into a survival-based freeze state that shuts down the prefrontal cortex. This is the center for critical thinking and logic. Once an individual's ability to analyze threats and recognize personal identity is incapacitated, they become highly suggestible and vulnerable to collective narcissistic programming. In this vulnerable state, the unconscious mind seeks safety in the numbers of a controlled group, leading the individual to abandon their personal sovereignty and adopt the grandiosity and defensive hostility of the elite-led collective group. The choreographed end result is that the individual is filled with a righteous anger directed at the elite's false intended target, which oftentimes, ironically, is the entity presenting the liberating truth. So ultimately, you end up getting conned into believing that the person that is about to free you is actually the person that's trying to trap you and enslave you. This is a result of narcissistic abuse programming. This is what happens to people who have been narcissistically abused. Don't believe me? Go and try and help somebody who's in a cult. Just go try and talk to them. The level of anger and hostility and personal attacks you will get will be completely off the charts. So anyway, so let's go ahead and get started taking a look. What I wanted to point out here is that what makes a psychological operation so just insidious is that it uses partial truths. Now, sometimes they'll use mostly truths. They'll use 98% truth. That 2% is the 2% that you need to understand what reality is, what is really going on. So that's how psychological operations work. All right, so how the elites are controlling the UFO disclosure subject parameters. The elites control the subject parameters by enforcing a weaponized reductionism that restricts the entire UFO conversation to the narrowest possible lens. All right, so this is actually what's happening. Basically, what I'm going to explain to you here is that when you hear the words UFO disclosure by anybody in the media, even by the vast majority of disclosure advocates, you are only hearing a partial disclosure that the media has funneled you into. And it's very important to understand, how this can be destructive to your ability to understand and find the truth. So the elites control the subject parameters by enforcing a weaponized reductionism that restricts the entire UFO conversation to the narrowest possible lens: physical, hardware, and national security threats. In other words, they want to talk about spaceships and whether or not they're harmful to you. And by relentlessly focusing on UAP intercepts, transmedium capabilities, and the potential for foreign adversary arms race, the mainstream narrative ensures that the public's nervous system remains in a state of high alert survivalism. This focus on threat and defense triggers the amygdala, effectively locking the viewer into a 3D materialist mindset where the only relevant questions are: who owns the spacecraft and what kind of weapons do they carry? This is a deliberate parameter control designed to keep the human mind from drifting toward the one area that the elites cannot govern, which is the expansion of consciousness. So it's also just important to understand that UFO disclosure has a lot to do with more than just what are those things in the sky and what kind of weapons do they have. Who's behind it? Who's piloting it? Why? What's the history? All of that. That is not being addressed. And so by just focusing on this one thing, what it does is it creates limited communication and limited dialogue and limited investigation, and it creates fear, which can be manipulated if it's done by somebody who has nefarious intentions. So furthermore, these controlled parameters act as a psychological glass ceiling by dismissing any mention of ET consciousness, interdimensional origin, or spiritual evolution as unscientific or irrelevant. By anchoring the debate in the fiscal 2026 NDAA mandates and evidence-based military sensor data, they create a false dichotomy where you are either a serious patriot concerned with aerospace safety, or you are a delusional kook interested in the metaphysical. This division is the primary tool used to maintain traumatic cognitive dissonance. It acknowledges the physical reality of the phenomena, the partial truth, while systematically devaluing the spiritual and personal significance, the full truth, the people behind it, the beings behind it, the history behind it. Consequently, the public is led to believe that the real disclosure is simply a government report on alien technology threats, rather than perhaps a profound realization that the arrival of these beings could be a frequency-driven event intended to dissolve the very power structures that are currently disclosing them. So that, this, what I just read, has kind of a spiritual bent to it. But if we go beyond that, if that's all we're thinking about, what are those machines in the sky? What kind of weapons do they have? Can they harm us? And then that becomes the entire discussion. And I've seen this over and over and over again in supposed disclosure. So let's keep going. So before I get into anything else, let's go into the next thing, which is a scripted alien invasion, 2026 disclosure scenario. Now, this is a completely hypothetical scenario. This is not something that, to my understanding, is actually going on. I'm not aware that it's actually going on. I don't have any proof of any of that. But it's important to take a look at this, because by looking at this really extreme hypothetical example, we can take a look at how we are being influenced and how we're responding to the supposed disclosure that is happening. All right. So again, this is a hypothetical disclosure scenario. All right. So in this hypothetical scenario, the psychological operation functions as a multi-layered narrative trap designed to consolidate global power under a preemptive military banner. By deploying carefully vetted whistleblowers, individuals who appear to be risking everything to expose the truth, the elites establish a false baseline of credibility. These actors validate the public's existing suspicions by confirming that the non-human technology exists, but they omit the critical detail: that a terrestrial secret military infrastructure has already reverse engineered and weaponized this technology for decades. By framing the advanced craft as exclusively extraterrestrial and unbeatable by current human standards, the operation ensures that the population feels a profound sense of technological helplessness and vulnerability. So you get it, right? So in this hypothetical scenario, what we have is people not telling you the truth about, number one, human capability and the intentions of the supposed UAPs. So this could be a scenario where if such a military existed that had this, if they wanted to conduct a psychological operation, one of the things that they would do is they would fill the skies with their own highly advanced technology that the public is unaware of. They would fill the skies with these, fill them with advanced drones, with ships, with strange lights in the sky that people can't comprehend because they're using human technology that you're not aware of. This would then create a potential. This would inflame the fears of people because they don't know what they're looking at. Right? So that again is a hypothetical scenario. All right. So once this stage is set, the transition to the preemptive strike phase begins. Again, this is hypothetical. The psychological operation culminates in an orchestrated, forced disclosure where the military suddenly reveals its hidden defensive capabilities as a necessary response to an imminent fabricated ET threat. This creates a massive spike in traumatic cognitive dissonance as the public is simultaneously relieved by the secret protection and terrified by the hostile alien narrative. In this state of high-stress suggestibility, critical thinking is bypassed and the individual is primed for collective narcissistic programming. The masses are manipulated to identify with the defensive military collective. viewing any ET presence in the solar system as an existential enemy. This narrative allows the elites to launch aggressive space-based warfare under the guise of planetary security, effectively weaponizing human fear to maintain a permanent state of high-tech martial law. So, short answer is that in this scenario, what would happen is that this so-called secret military would take an actual phenomenon, an actual extraterrestrial phenomenon, and then falsify it by magnifying it, by sending up their own technology, all the while telling you humans don't have that kind of technology. So every time you look and you see something you don't recognize, you think, oh my God, look at all those ETs. And then this could lead for a potential false flag. Again, this is hypothetical. But if they wanted to, they could take their own technology and they could fake some kind of alien attack. Or they could fake alien abductions or something like that. They could use their technology to fool the public that aliens, extraterrestrials, are doing something harmful. Once they've done that and they've established that in the minds of the collective, then what they do is they will come out. So this is when they will do real disclosure, quote unquote. They will come out and they will say, yes, you're right. We have had this technology the whole time. We did recover downed craft, and we did reverse engineer it. We didn't want to tell anybody about it because we didn't want to cause a panic. We didn't want you to know about the abductions and the attacks. We didn't want you to know that we were at a loss and we couldn't defend ourselves. But now we can, and since now we can protect you. We're now going to tell you the truth. This is what the ETs are doing. They're attacking us in this way, abducting us, doing these horrible things. Yes, it's true. We admit it. We lied to you, but now we're telling you the truth. And now we need your help and your money, and we're going to put martial law over the whole earth, and we want you to support us. In fact, join, Star Trek, the Space Force, and we're going to go out and launch an attack. Okay, that's all hypothetical. Obviously, none of that has happened yet. But if some nefarious elite group wanted to and had the capability, that would be a very effective psychological operation to get you to believe something that wasn't true and to support them and be a part of something that actually worked against the whole point of disclosure, which is knowing the truth and changing your reality based on that. Okay, so let's now talk about real disclosure has nothing to do with spaceships. So this is what I was saying earlier. What we're talking about now, disclosure, we're only talking about, oh, look at that. What kind of technology is that? And we don't have it. And is it a threat to us? And that's all that the disclosure that is going on that I see. That's all that's being talked about. And I'm here to tell you that that is not disclosure. Those are just tiny little details. That's like saying, I'm investigating this guy, John Smith, and the only thing I'm doing is I'm monitoring his car and I'm watching him drive his car. And I'm figuring out by watching his car what kind of technology his car has. So now I have this report on John's car and his motorcycle and his electric bicycle. And I'm giving you all of the technological parameters. And I've never seen a house like this or a car like this. Here's all the That's what disclosure is. It's ridiculous. It's childish. And people are, on the one hand, they're very sincere in wanting to know. They want to know what the government is doing. They want to know what the ETs are doing. They want to know what's really going on, what is really in the skies. I've heard all this stuff. Some of it's scary. Some of it sounds cool. I want to know the truth. And then there are people who are already afraid of anything they don't understand. And so this information is inflaming that. They haven't come out and said anything, but they say things like, yes, we don't know what this technology is, and is this a threat? They've shut down our nuclear capabilities at one point, or reports of that have happened. And does this mean that there's a threat? They don't come out and say it, but it's obvious. And now it becomes the public, and I'm sure this is going on, a lot of the public is going, tell us how dangerous they are. Why aren't you telling us the truth about how dangerous these ETs are? And so this again is manipulative. It dangles the carrot and but it's the smell. It's just like the cartoons. Remember the old 40s cartoons where the smell would get in the nose and pull them along? That's what's happening here. Nobody's thinking critically. So real disclosure has nothing to do with spaceships. Real disclosure is a shift in state, not a shift in scenery. While the mainstream narrative attempts to ground the phenomenon in the material world by focusing on UAP hardware and sensor data, these physical markers are merely the 3D shadows of a much larger reality. To focus solely on the spaceship is to fall into a psychological trap that keeps the observer in a state of perceived inferiority, waiting for a government agency to explain a technology we can't understand. In reality, the craft are simply the visual interface used to bridge the gap between our current physical reality and perhaps their higher dimensional frequency. True disclosure occurs when an individual stops looking at the sky for a savior in a machine and begins to recognize the interdimensional presence that has always been accessible within the expanded human mind. In other words, whatever these beings have accomplished, we can accomplish. We can do it. That, again, is something, it's an unconscious assumption. I had it. That you see an extraterrestrial craft, and that's why people automatically go, oh, that's from outer space. But if I go, no, that's actually human-based, they go, no, we don't have anything like that. How do you know? If some being on some other planet can create that technology, why can't we? And then we get into the discussion of has these technologies, like zero-point technology, has this been suppressed? There's all kinds of reports. I can't confirm them, but there's all kinds of reports of people getting Charlie Kirked because they came up with zero-point energy machines. So again, we're continuously being told. I remember talking with a guy, and somebody had asked him, have you watched this movie, having to do with zero-point energy? And the guy said, no. And says, why? And he says, well, my uncle once tried to create a zero-point energy machine, and he was incapable, so I don't think it can happen. I mean, it just, that kind of thinking. And so then any evidence that's presented to him, he just brushes it off. And we've got a lot of people that do that. And that is a result of the manipulation. This is part of the manipulated narrative. We don't have that kind of technology. That's not something humans can do. So obviously, if somebody did it, we can do it. In fact, perhaps we already did. Perhaps we did it thousands and thousands of years ago and lost the technology. Anyway. So the disclosure the elites fear isn't the revealing of a hangar in Nevada. It is the frequency-driven awakening of the human nervous system. Real contact is a biological event that bypasses the traumatic cognitive dissonance of the 3D matrix by retuning the human brain to a state of coherence. This has been my experience. So I can only speak from my experience. And as if you didn't already know, I am an experiencer. I have extensive personal, physical, and higher dimensional contact with higher dimensional extraterrestrials. And the disclosure is not just that these beings exist, and not just that they exist in a higher frequency and in a higher dimension, and not that they have access to all kinds of technology we can't even begin to understand, but that they exist in a reality that we currently can't access because of our third dimension. Now, once you experience that, it starts going into this. I mean, there's no barrier between physical and spiritual anymore. It becomes the same thing. Science, consciousness, quantum consciousness, and quantum science become fused into the same thing. And so there's no way to talk about extraterrestrials without talking about a change, a shift in spiritual understanding. And I'm here to tell you that once true disclosure happens, which is the disclosure of reality outside of our third dimensional perception, that the disclosure of that will completely destroy religion. It'll destroy it. It'll nuke it. And it won't be because somebody came and said, here's the truth, like I do. I come back and say, here's the historical truth about such a religion. This is why this religion could never have happened, because here's the historical truth. Because that doesn't bypass people's, their traumatic programming or their emotional agendas. But when you personally experience it, then what's going to happen is people are going to go, oh, that thing I believed in, that can't possibly be true anymore. But there's also the fulfillment, the spiritual fulfillment that comes from connecting to these higher dimensions that completely destroys anything any religion has ever provided. So, so real contact is a biological event that bypasses the traumatic cognitive dissonance of the 3D matrix by retuning the human brain to a state of coherence. This is why the focus remains so heavily on ships and threats. As long as you believe ETs are aliens from out there with better tech, you remain disconnected from the fact that you share the same foundational consciousness. And when the veil thins, the ships become irrelevant, because the interaction moves into the realm of direct knowing, telepathy, and the dissolution of the blank slate programming. Ultimately, disclosure is the moment humanity realizes that the, quote, aliens didn't arrive in 2026. They simply became visible to us once we stopped allowing our perception to be managed by a controlled hardware-centric narrative, right? So we live like that. We're talking about Newtonian science. And what I find interesting and ironic is that this kind of scientific approach to the world was actually came from the church, the supposed organization that was teaching you spiritual truths. This was and just along those lines, like in Europe, you'll find a lot of places that are called Devil's Hole and Devil's Spring and Devil's Lake and Devil's Waterfall and Devil Mountain. Those were all pagan spiritual power zones. So what the church did, they came in and said, oh, that's where the devil lives. And then they're told you the devil is bad, and they give you this duality. And then people stopped going there, because if you go there and experience some kind of, at least at the very least, your belief in the old spiritual ways, then you can't be controlled by the religion. And so science has been doing that. So science has been keeping things reduced to the mere Newtonian physics of things. And when we start going into other realms and connecting it to consciousness, science frowns on that. And it's because, again, it's part of this control mechanism, controlling how you think. So the bottom line, what this very wordy thing here is trying to say, is that when you have an experience of consciousness, then you no longer are worried about what kind of car somebody's driving. Again, that's what I hear. People, UFO conferences, to me, are just ridiculous, because they just want to talk about craft all the time and what the craft looked like. And, it's like, why don't you just go and knock on John's door and say, hey, you want to come over for a cup of coffee? I'd like to get to know you. Instead of sitting out there with your eyeglass and looking at what kind of car is he driving and what kind of tires does he have. And I'm trying to figure out, is that a 4-stroke engine, or is that a V6 or a V8? Because that's all that's happening. It's being reduced to What is that technological thing? I don't understand it. And is it going to hurt me? And no question about who's behind it. And again, the other thing about UFO, the giant UFO community that wants to talk about all this stuff, and they do these big conventions. People write books, they go on tours, they go on podcasts. You don't hear anybody talking about, you know what, I did that thing, human-initiated contact, and I communicated with these beings and I found out about them. You don't hear those people. Those people, I mean, I'm treated like a crazy lunatic because that's my main thing. It's like I have personal experience. I'm sharing with you my personal experience. I can give you the tools to have that same personal experience. Now, it's going to completely blow your mind wide open. It's going to destroy your understanding of reality, which also destroys your collective narcissistic programming. It completely destroys that. It heals the narcissistic abuse. Why? 2 reasons. Number 1, higher dimensional frequencies don't operate on the level of abuse and lying and deception and predating on somebody. That's 3rd dimensional lower frequency stuff. We're talking physics here. The physics reality, the scientific reality is at higher frequencies. Those thoughts, those feelings, those intentions don't exist. They can't exist there. And so when you experience that, people want to know, how do you know that these beings aren't hurtful to you? How do you know they're not lying to you? I can only tell you that I found out through experience, and you'll never know unless you experience it. Now, this is coming from somebody who used to do exorcisms. I know what demons are. I know they exist. I know what they feel like. I know what their energy is like. So when I did CE5, I wasn't afraid because if I ran into something evil, I knew how to handle it. Now, many people are afraid and they might not know that they have complete control over demons. That's the one thing that human beings don't know. They have complete, total control over demons. All you have to do is just decide that you're more powerful than they are, and you are. I experienced it, and I know from experience what a predatory spiritual being is, and I know what a benevolent spiritual being is. And I'm here to tell you, having been there through experience, you can believe me or not believe me, but having been there, I've experienced that in those higher frequencies where the actual extraterrestrials who are coming to Earth exist, in those frequencies, there is nothing evil. There is nothing to fear. And so all of the things you've heard about good ETs versus bad ETs, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, that's all part of what could be described as, some kind of operation to manipulate you and keep you in fear and keep you controlled. But it's also part of human nature. Our 3rd dimensional human nature resists that because when we go there, when we expand, when we awaken, we're going to have to die to what we understand, and that feels like death. All right, so I told you we were going to talk about actual disclosure. So full disclosure is already here. I'll save time. I won't go through all of this. Full disclosure is already here. So the idea that you're waiting around for the government to disclose, and people are so upset, and not only that, but they think that once the government gives full disclosure, then somehow that's going to change society, and it won't. How do I know that? Because full disclosure is already here, and people don't take advantage of it. I'm telling you, I'm going to give you the information that's already publicly available, and there are going to be people watching this who are going to refuse to go look at it. And the only thing I can say is that is a 3rd dimensional mind that doesn't want to expand, but wants to stay in the drama of disclosure and UFO and ET disclosure, and we deserve that. Not only is the physical disclosure available, so is the personal experience. Instead of waiting around for somebody to tell you what ETs are, go and talk to them. It's very simple. Just go and do it. You don't want to? That's okay. You're not ready? That's okay. You don't have to. But once that happens, that is going to be the real disclosure. And anyway, let me give you the disclosure. So the official website for Dr. Stephen Greer, who is again, I don't understand this, but there are people who are sincere who want to badmouth Dr. Greer, and I don't know why. I don't know why you want to do that. There has been 2 attempts on his life. 2. Not just like they were going to do it and it failed. No, one was a physical attack, gave him cancer, almost killed him. Second one was a car accident that almost killed him. And at least one of his team was killed. So, when people want to talk about him being a grifter, I don't understand that either. He has a nonprofit. He charges money for things, but that's because he's got this program that he's involved in. He spends all of his time, as I can see it, working behind the scenes in the government, working with people for actual disclosure. And so that stuff costs money. So I don't understand where people come up with this. So you can go to his website, drstephengreer.com, and his intelligence archive is Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, DPIA, which you can find on his website. So these resources provide the real disclosure data that I mentioned, allowing my viewers to verify the claims regarding illegal secret military operations and suppressed energy technologies. You can go figure that out for yourself. You don't have to wait. Why are you waiting? You don't trust the government. Here's the thing that also gets me. You don't trust the government. You don't trust the Pentagon, but you're waiting around for the Pentagon to tell you what they're doing. I mean, do you honestly think they're going to tell you the truth? Why are you waiting for them? The disclosure is already there. I mean, if you go to the YouTube video, search YouTube for the Disclosure Project National Press Club event of June 12th, 2023. Search YouTube for that very video. You will hear actual whistleblowers, not just what's presented to you. There's a handful of ex-military whistleblowers, and you can come to your own conclusion about whether or not they have an agenda or not. The fact that they're on all mainstream media television, and that whenever there's some kind of congressional whistleblower thing, they're in the front row. I mean, you don't get in the front row of Congress, unless you got connections. So you can come to your own conclusion about their believability or not. But in that video, once again, it is the Disclosure Project National Press Club event, June 12th, 2023. That video has far more than just a handful of ex-military. They're hundreds. And if you go to the archives, you will find, I think it's approaching 1,000. And these are people who have actually lost their career, they've lost their safety, and they have given complete, total disclosure about what is happening. So stop complaining about when is disclosure going to happen. It's already happened. And stop waiting around for the abusive narcissist to tell the truth. It's never going to happen. Whatever they volunteer is going to be just enough truth to get you where they want to take you. So stop waiting around for the Pentagon and stop complaining that government, like the idea that Congress is going to somehow be involved in full disclosure. Come on, grow up. Wake up just a little bit, please. And the thing is that the people in charge of this planet are only in charge of this planet because we've allowed them to be in charge of this planet. And if we make the decision that we don't want them in charge anymore, just that in and of itself will destroy their power. That is the thing that they fear the most. You deciding that you don't want to be part of this narrative anymore. So I've said, if you really want to, I've got a book, Interdimensional Revolution. And I very clearly state in that book that the way to transform our society is not through political action. It is not through any kind of protests or any kind of activism. It's about changing your own consciousness. And we have access to a superpowered way to do that that is available to everybody. And it's one of the names of it is called CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind Protocols. Look it up. Watch the movie, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. You can watch it for free on YouTube and on Amazon. And that's what got me going on it, because I didn't believe in ETs. And if there were ETs, I was afraid of them. And I saw that, and I said, this guy says, Dr. Greer, that if I do this thing, this protocol, that if I do that, that I can communicate with these higher dimensional, powerful spiritual beings. Well, I don't believe that's real, but I'm going to prove it to myself one way or another. And I sure as heck did. And you can also. And on this channel, we do live guided interdimensional meditation. We do them every Wednesday and Saturday evening. I'm currently doing them live, 7:30 p.m. on this channel. You don't have to come here if you can't come here at those times. You can go to the live section on my YouTube channel and play any of the hundreds of live guided meditations. If you want to get into some really crazy stuff, do the ones we've been doing for the past year. If you want to go back to the nuts and bolts, bread and butter, go back to the first ones that we did. You'll have to search, further on. But the first ones, I was just basically doing, versions of CE5. And we were doing things like trying to send energy to Earth from the sun. This was the thing, I talk about it. I did that the first time. The first live meditation I did was because I was communicating with ETs, and I said, when is this solar flash thing going to happen? And they said, when you decide. And I said, okay, fine, I decide. And I figured I might as well do a live meditation, and I don't know, 5 people showed up, and we went to the sun and sent energy to the Earth, and the ETs went crazy. The light beings would, with happiness and joy, thank you so much. But that's because I went out and I did stuff. I experienced it. I tried things. I don't wait around for people to tell me what to think. I never have. I have always never come to any conclusions about anything until I can personally verify it through experience. So I recommend that you do the same. So let's stop this nonsense about waiting around for UFO disclosure, and stop waiting around for somebody to tell us who ETs are. Why don't we just go talk to them and find out? And when we do that, our entire reality will shift. That's it for me, my friends. I love you all. Please be very good to yourselves. If you want to become an apprentice of mine, because I teach all kinds of other spiritual stuff, go here to thunderwizard.com, click on memberships, and then scroll around until you see Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong. You can click on that. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. You get access to all kinds of stuff. And if you want to work with me personally, there are ways that you can do that again in membership. You can also go to thunderwizard.com, click on shop. And if you want to have a really simple practice that also helps connect to higher dimensions, do the Summoning the Immortals Qigong. So you can find that in the shop. There's a bunch of other really cool stuff in there. Now, if you want to know my methods that I've, learned over years and years of, sometimes daily communication with ETs, you can go to contact.thunderwizard.com. I tell you all of the tips and tricks and, all the things that I've had to figure out the hard way. I teach you, what to expect and how to navigate interdimensional communication. And if you want access to real power, go to maushan.thunderwizard.com. If you have questions about anything, how to connect with me, any of the practices, put it in the comments section and ask a question, and I will answer it as long as it's respectful and honest. I read all the comments, and that's it. I love you all. Be very good to yourself. I'll see you all very soon.